My guest today, Jay Knight, is a partner at Bass, Berry& Sims in Nashville. Jay and I have been friends for quite some time, even before he served in the SEC's Division of Corporation Finance. When he was living here in DC, we co-taught a securities law class at George Mason's Law School, and he's done a great job blogging at Bass, Berry, the Securities Law Exchange, for the past several years. I'm Brock Romanek, today on Zippy Point. So Jay, I think this is going to be a fun video. It's hard to get in trouble for the cover page, I guess, unless you check some boxes that cause you to get picked by the corp fin staff for screening. But I just can't remember. It's been so long since I've been on the staff. Does the staff actually look at the cover page when they're selected 10K for review?
So the staff will usually include the cover page kind of in their just general form check. So, you know, there's more items on the cover page that are not as important, but there's a few that could catch the company from, could allow a comment. Let me redo that. There's a few items on the cover page that registrants really should pay particular attention to because they could draw a comment. But yes, that is kind of in the normal course of a review, they would review the cover page.
So this is what the form itself looks like. If you haven't ever seen the Form 10K, it's got 5 pages of instructions. And then it actually has the cover page as sort of, this is what your cover page is going to look like. So this has got a bunch of blanks. It's literally 2 pages in the form, but it's very rare that a cover page goes more than a page and then maybe a little bit on to the second page when you actually fill it in. So there's some blank spots here or some check boxes that just won't be applicable to you, and so you won't use them. The first thing that's really odd, I think, is that you actually have on your cover page this thing at the top about the United States Securities and Exchange Commission with the city, Washington, D.C., and the zip code. I just find that kind of funny that it's got a federal agency's name on the cover. And so as you'll see, there's a number of places, I think, on the 10K that has sort of useless information, and some of it's antiquated, some of it's information just for the staff's use, and there might be other ways that you can input data into Edgar where it gets privately sent to the staff, to the SEC, and it doesn't have to be part of your 10K, because although the 10K itself is not necessarily meant to be a pretty document, what happens these days is a lot of companies are using 10K wraps where the 10K is actually built into the glossy annual report. And what will happen is that an investor will be just flipping through the pages, getting through those fluffy pages at the beginning of the 10K wrap, and then all of a sudden you get this sort of ugly page that's the 10K cover page. So here we have Microsoft's latest 10K, and as you can see right up at the top here, they have the US SEC. Then you check box whether this is a regular 10K or if you've changed your fiscal year end during the last year, you're going to check that it's a transition report. So obviously most companies are going to check the top box. It's just a regular 10K. And then you have something called the commission file number. So this is a file number when your company is first brought into the 34 Act filing stream. You're either going to be filing a Form 8A when you're due your IPO, or if you'll file a Form 10 if you're getting into the 34X stream is not part of the regular IPO process. And the SEC will assign you a commission filing number. So if you have a commission file number that starts with a 1, that means that it's registered, your equity is registered under Section 12B of the Exchange Act. If it's a 0, so that means 0 dash something, that would be your securities are registered under Section 12G. And then if it's a 333 number, it's your securities are registered under Section 15D. So here Microsoft has got a 1. It's actually, they have 001. So you see here in the right-hand corner, this is actually on the SEC's website. In the right-hand corner, the first filing they have the SEC commission filing number, and it has a 001. But most companies on their cover page won't have the 001 like Microsoft does. You see here, McDonald's has just got the 1. You don't need to include the double zeros, what I'm getting at. It's not that big a deal. Yeah, and I mean, the commission file number is not all that important. That's probably one of those things that probably doesn't need to be on the cover page. You can search for Edgar filings by company name, by your CIK code, which is the public Edgar code that each company gets assigned when they file a Form ID when they're first getting into the SEC's reporting system. But for whatever reason, it's still on the SEC's form. The name of the company has to be the name as in your charter, so it wouldn't just be Microsoft, it'd be Microsoft Corporation. You see here with McDonald's, it's McDonald's Corporation. It could be an Inc., it could be any of those different things that is the technical name, the official name as filed with your charter is filed with the state in which you're incorporated. Jay, do you want to talk about the next couple items here?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the next portion of the cover page is related to just the principal address and principal executive offices of the company, and Microsoft has their address and phone number. Just one kind of practice point on that is to make sure that the number that you use is actually a number that's going to get to the right person if an SEC staff member was calling. I recall one time in an exam when we were getting ready to send a letter, and I called the number that was listed on there, and it sent me to a whole different country than what was listed as the principal executive office for the corporation. So we ended up asking a question like, can you reconcile why there's a difference here? And it was really more or less just kind of explain, we don't really understand. And it was for tax purposes, which we understood that piece, but there seemed to be a disconnect. So anyway, just practice pointer is make sure you include the number that would actually get to at least the office that you're wanting to, whether or not the GC's office or the CFO's office. And it doesn't have to be a direct line, but just, in the general ballpark.
Yeah, you'd want to give out a customer service number on your cover of your 10K because the person answering the phone is going to not know to route you to someone in investor relations or the corporate secretary's office, wherever you need to go. So then you have this IRS ID number. That could be another one of these antiquated things. I'm not really sure why any investor needs to know that, but maybe someone will send me an email or put a comment below this video on YouTube indicating why that's on the 10K cover, but I'm at a loss. There is this voluntary thing that Microsoft does where they put actually the URL of their investor relations webpage. That's not required, but that's a nice voluntary disclosure, a nice touch. And there's a few other things that companies can do that are voluntary. This is a logo that, McDonald's is obviously a big brand name company. They like to use that arch as much as they can, and it's nice. It's got a little piece of color to the 10K.
Yeah.
So that's obviously allowed by the SEC too, but not required to have your logo.
Yeah. I'm seeing that more common now lately with companies adding their logos just voluntarily to kind of keep this more of as a brand, especially when you're going to be doing a 10K wrap and this information is going to get mailed out to your stockholders.
Then you have the securities registered either under Section 12B of the Act, that's again to the NYSE or NASDAQ, or 12G. So for Microsoft, it's none for 12G. And for 12B, they've got their common stock listed on NASDAQ. And then they've got 3 types of notes that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So,
yeah, and that table has actually now been it has been updated such that this table is kind of mirrored across all the Exchange Act forms with the 10Qs and the 8Ks. So it's an easy reference for where you would find the trading symbol for the different equity and debt securities that are registered.
So Jake, can you take us through this now we have a series of checkboxes where you're going to check yes or no. And why don't you take us through these? And the first one is regarding the WIXI, the well-known seasoned issuer.
Right. So these next few boxes are really just data gathering for the commission. This information is all tagged now. So this first one relates to whether or not the company is a well-known seasoned issuer, and they would check the box yes or no, and that would be a determination made at each 10K filing. The next one is, is the company required to file reports under 13 or 15D? And essentially, is it a voluntary filer, or is it required under the 34 Act to file? Obviously, Microsoft checks no because it's not a voluntary filer. They're required to file because they have 12B securities listed above. The next one relates to just, is the company current in their reporting? Have they filed all reports under 13 or 15D, also have they been subject to filing requirements for the past 90 days? So, so they obviously they're current, and they've been a current filer for more than 90 days. I suspect the 90 days may relate to, from a Rule 144 perspective. But in any event, there is a box check there for, are they current or not? Just note, if it's a brand new IPO company, they would be checking no, because they haven't been subject to filing requirements for 90 days. The next box relates to interactive data files, and, has the company complied with their obligations to submit those for the preceding 9 months or 12 months or shorter period of time, if required.
And then to back us up to their prior one, and with the current filings, that doesn't necessarily mean your filings were timely. You could have delinquent filings, but still be able to check that you're current. So that's an important distinction, because if you're not filing timely, then you might lose your eligibility to use your short form registration for an S3. And if you were really late, then you might even draw some enforcement interest from the SEC. That's pretty rare, unless you're chronically delinquent with lots of forms. But interestingly enough, the checkbox here doesn't help the SEC determine whether or not you're eligible for S3. Right.
Okay, so the next checkbox here listed on the cover page, just like what type of filer is it? Is it a large accelerated filer, a accelerated, non-accelerated? So this is one that a company will analyze at the end of each fiscal year based on its public float at the end of the second quarter, and so they'll be checking. They can check multiple boxes here, so they could be a non-accelerated filer and emerging growth company. So obviously they wouldn't check both the large accelerated and an accelerated, but they could check the EGC one, emerging growth company, plus another one if it applies. So the next box is also related to emerging growth companies. Is the company have they elected not to use the extended transition period for complying with financial accounting standards? As you recall, the EGC rules provide an EGC issuer to comply with the extended transition periods if they choose to. And so that box just relates to, is the company electing not to rely on that? I'm not a huge fan of the negative boxes, like the old Section 16 box that has been removed that said, if you weren't going to have a delinquent filing. It's a little bit harder to understand, but in any event, that's how the box is checked. So if you see that box checked, then that means they are not going to be relying on that extended transition relief.
And at the same time that the SEC removed that as Section 16 delinquent box, they actually added this column for trading symbols, the ticker symbol for your securities. So that's a nice addition.
Yeah, and then the next box relates to, is a company a shell company? That's a pretty straightforward. Most companies are going to be checking no, just like Microsoft did here. And then the last column, the last item there is just, there's a requirement to include your public float as at the end of the last fiscal year. So that's that calculation. You want to make sure you have good backup support for that. The staff on occasion has asked what companies to kind of show their math on how they arrive at that, particularly because that relates to, S3 eligibility. And so, just make sure you have good record keeping to kind of show how you arrived at that. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of pushback on what that number is unless it's just egregious, but it's still something to have good support for. And then the next item is just related to how many shares are outstanding, and you're just giving that as of the latest practical date. And so since Microsoft is a June 30 filer, this is probably just shortly before they filed their 10K and had enough record keeping to get this from their transfer agent to put that out there. And then the final one there is the documents incorporated by reference. So, if you're going to be like most companies like Microsoft, incorporating by reference information into your part 3 of your 10K from your proxy statement, which, for most companies hasn't been filed yet, you can forward incorporate that information by reference. by including a note here that you're incorporating that information by reference. And then in your part 3 of your 10K is where you will reference the proxy statement and, whether or not specifically the sections or just more broadly that you're incorporating that information from your proxy statement. So it's very helpful.
And you can see here that this is McDonald's 10K. They just worded a little bit different, indicating that the 2020 we filed no later than 120 days. That's a time period that you're required to file the proxy 120 days from the fiscal year end in order to be eligible to incorporate by reference. Jay and I actually have another Vid-Guide about incorporation by reference that you should check out. If you amend your 10K, you're going to have change. The only changes that will be up here at the top. You're going to have a /A after 10K. And then you indicate what number of the amendment that you have. And then you might update the number of shares you have outstanding as of the latest practicable date. Other than that, all the other information should be the same unless some of these things, the statuses of them change for you. If you've registered new classes as securities, you would list those, all that kind of thing. This is a 2011 10K. That's why it's missing the trading symbol. That wasn't required until 2019. And then you'll see the old-fashioned delinquent. If you're delinquent, Section 16 filings are delinquent. This is what this checkbox here. Yep. That's why this looks a little bit different than it looks like after 2019.
Right. Yep.
So thanks very much, Jay.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.